Hi everyone, I'm Mike and welcome to the test range and to another video in our ongoing History of series. Today we'll be taking a deep dive on an American classic. So for pretty much all of our History of videos, I use some AI for voiceover and imagery, and relax. It's okay. It's fine. I hope you enjoy, but it's all right. And if you do enjoy, please throw me a like. So here we go. This is the history of Colt Python.
In the realm of firearms, few objects evoke the same level of reverence, mythos, and sheer aesthetic appreciation as the Colt Python. It's the gold standard for revolvers, a piece of industrial art, and arguably the finest production double-action handgun ever manufactured in the United States. The Python was created not out of an intensive multi-million-dollar corporate development program, but from the experimental tinkering of factory-floor gunsmiths trying to build a niche target pistol. When it debuted in 1955, it defied traditional revolver design. It built an immediate reputation on three unshakable pillars: match-grade accuracy, a butter-smooth trigger pull, and a legendary rigid bank vault cylinder lockup. Yet the very handcrafted perfection that made it legendary also made it overly costly to produce, ultimately leading to its discontinuation and its spectacular modern resurrection. This is the history, the mechanical clockwork, and the engineering evolution of the Colt Python. We will explore how it was made, why its unique internal geometry separates it from every competitor, why it went away, and how modern metallurgy and manufacturing completely reimagined the Python for the 21st century. In 1955, post-war America was experiencing a boom in target shooting, particularly bullseye matches. At the time, shooters favored light and accurate .38 special loads. Al DeJohn, a gunsmith who started with Colt in 1946, along with factory superintendent Al Gunther, began to tinker with Colt's existing large I-frame, the same mechanical architecture found in the pre-war official police and Army special models. The Python was originally intended to be a large-frame .38 special target revolver. However, Colt wanted this new premium model to handle the formidable high-pressure .357 Magnum cartridge, which was rapidly gaining popularity. This presented a unique engineering challenge. The intense pressures of the Magnum round caused gas blowback and firing pin issues, repeatedly hammering the revolver's traditional fitted recoil plate. To solve this, DeJohn and Gunther eliminated the separate recoil plate altogether. They drilled the firing pinhole directly into the frame itself, while significantly beefing up the cylinder, the frame, and the top strap to contain the excessive pressure of the .357 Magnum blast. It was Al Gunther who first suggested adding the feature that would define the gun's silhouette forever: the iconic ventilated rib across the top of the barrel, designed to dissipate heat distortion away from the shooter's sight picture. They also added a full-length barrel underlug. Initially designed as a hollow housing, it was quickly left solid to act as a stabilizing muzzle weight to tame the intense recoil of the .357 Magnum. Colt decided to stick to its newly minted reptilian naming convention, following their 1950 .38 Special Cobra. On June 2, 1955, the very first Python left the factory floor, hand-built by master gunsmith Alfred DeJohn. It was born as Colt's top-of-the-line luxury model. If you talk to any revolver purist, they will eventually mention the Python's bank vault lockup. In almost all modern revolvers, it is completely normal to feel a tiny amount of rotational play in the cylinder when the hammer drops. This is an intentional design element by companies like Smith & Wesson or Ruger. But a vintage Python doesn't budge. It freezes like a block of solid granite due to the precise geometry of the locked-up cylinder. In a Smith & Wesson, the cylinder relies on a slight amount of built-in slack. The philosophy is that the incoming bullet can naturally find its own perfect alignment as it jumps from the cylinder throat into the barrel's forcing cone. Colt rejected that philosophy entirely. The Python forces a perfect, rigid alignment before the bullet ever leaves the casing. When you pull the trigger on a Python, the cylinder hand doesn't just rotate the cylinder until the bottom bolt drops into a notch. It keeps climbing. Colt's cylinder hand utilizes a unique dual-finger design. As the trigger reaches the absolute limit of its rearward travel, the top finger of the hand forcefully wedges itself against the ratchet tooth, pinning the cylinder tightly upward. At the exact time the hammer falls, the cylinder is compressed from both the bottom by the lock bolt and the top rear by the hand. It is physically trapped under intense mechanical tension. The key to the lockup is the direction of the cylinder's rotation. Unlike Smith & Wesson or Ruger, which rotate counterclockwise, a Colt cylinder rotates clockwise. A counterclockwise cylinder wants to lift away from the frame, relying solely on spring tension to keep it aligned. Because the Python's cylinder rotates clockwise to the right, the rotational force naturally drives the cylinder into the frame, wedging the lock bolt tighter into its recess. Combined with a subtly tapered bore featuring a 1 in 14-inch twist rate, the bullet entered a perfectly centered barrel every single time, yielding unprecedented velocity and precision. But this mechanical perfection came with an unintended consequence. It was incredibly delicate. Because the lockup relies on the cylinder hand physically jamming against the ratchet under immense pressure, thousands of rounds of intense .357 Magnum ammo would slowly wear down the microscopic edges of the cylinder hand. When this happened, the Python would go out of time. The cylinder hand could no longer apply enough pressure to freeze the cylinder, leading to inaccuracy or shaving lead at the forcing cone. And fixing a vintage Python's timing is a dying art. You couldn't just drop in a factory replacement part. A master gunsmith had to manually hammer, stretch, file, and hand-fit the components. Despite the mechanical maintenance, the first generation of Pythons, spanning from 1955 to 2005, became the undisputed gold standard of luxury handguns. Much of that allure came down to its finish, Colt's legendary royal blue. This wasn't just a chemical treatment. It was the product of immense labor. Colt's master polishers used increasingly fine polishing wheels, buffing the raw carbon steel until it looked like a black mirror before exposing it to the chemical bluing tanks. Initially, only 2 gunsmiths, Al DeJohn and Don Bedford, were allowed to assemble the Python. A single assembly required roughly 20 minutes of intricate hand fitting, compared to the 15 minutes needed for other Colt revolvers. The Python expanded through several iconic milestones, originally launching with a 6-inch barrel priced at $125, the exact same price as the reintroduced single-action Army. Demand exploded. By 1969, over 100,000 had been built. In the 1960s, a 4-inch model was introduced, immediately becoming a favorite for plainclothes detectives and state highway patrols, including Georgia, Florida, and Colorado. The Python's legendary barrel was so revered that Colt even created rare hybrids that are highly collectible today. In 1985, they made the Colt Boa, mating a Python barrel to a Trooper Mark V frame. In 1994, they built the stainless steel Colt Grizzly, putting a ported Python barrel on a King Cobra frame. While these hybrids look like Pythons, they use entirely different internal coil spring mechanics. Authentic Pythons remained fiercely tied to the classic, labor-intensive E and I-frame leaf spring lockwork. By the late 1990s, the modern firearms landscape had fundamentally shifted. Polymer-framed, high-capacity, semi-automatic, 9mm pistols completely dominated the military, law enforcement, and civilian sectors. Law enforcement agencies realized a semi-automatic fired a round with similar ballistic characteristics to a .38 Special, but with triple the ammunition capacity and significantly less liability. In October 1999, Colt made a heartbreaking announcement. Regular production of the Python would cease. The complex, hand-fitted clockwork internals simply could not compete in an era of automated CNC machining. The custom gun shop kept the name alive with limited runs like the Python Elite, but by 2005, the production lines fell silent. However, instead of fading into obscurity, the Python transitioned into the ultimate collector's prize. Prices for pristine, vintage, royal blue models skyrocketed into the thousands. In 2010, a media event relaunched the Colt Python back into mainstream consciousness. AMC launched the series The Walking Dead. For 9 of the show's 11 seasons, protagonist Rick Grimes carried a 6-inch Colt Python as his unmistakable signature sidearm. This exposure introduced the classic mid-century revolver to an entirely new generation of enthusiasts. In January 2020, after 15 years of retirement, the Python returned. The second-generation Colt Python was completely re-engineered to survive the rigors of modern shooting, swapping delicate hand craftsmanship for present-day metallurgy. The differences under the side plate are noteworthy. Where the first generation required manual filing and stoning of forged steel, the 2020 generation relies on hyper-precise CNC machining and metal injection molding. The old Pythons were considered slightly fragile under a steady diet of full-power magnum loads. Colt fixed that by completely redesigning the frame. They added 30% more stainless steel directly into the top strap above the cylinder, replacing the older carbon steel parts with a stronger, highly corrosion-resistant 410 series alloy. Internally, the part count was simplified from over 42 individual components down to fewer than 30. The temperamental V-spring was reshaped into a linear U-shaped leaf spring, entirely eliminating stacking, where the trigger pull weight sharply increased at the very end of its travel. Finally, the old safety hammer block was replaced with a modern drop-safe transfer bar. Purists will always argue that the modern 2020 Python lacks the literal magic touch of the master gunsmiths from the 1950s. And they're right. It is a different machine mechanically. But by removing the delicate, high-maintenance dependencies of the past, Colt created an overbuilt, hyper-durable linear shooter designed to be run hard, while beautifully honoring the iconic aesthetic soul of the original. Whether you own an original 1955 royal blue masterpiece or a brand new stainless steel model, the Python remains the undisputed king of snakes. What do you think? Does the 2020 redesign live up to the legendary name? Or do you prefer the old-school clockwork of the first generation? Which legendary firearm should we feature in a future video? Let me know in the comments. Hit that subscribe button for more deep dive firearms history, and we'll see you next time.
Hey there, it's Mike again. Thanks for watching the video. Since you made it this far, which is pretty much the end, why not just give us a like and a subscribe? Doesn't cost anything and might make you feel pretty good. I know it'll sure help us out. So yeah, we'll see you in the next one.